Hello there guys, and welcome back to another video. So when I think about fantasy, and what makes a good fantasy game, film or novel, I always tend to think about exploration, about strange and unique places. There's something amazing about playing a game, seeing a strange marker on a hill and travelling to that random place because you're just curious. Because most exploration takes place on the journey between point A and point B, a section of gameplay that most DMs will skip over, D&D, I've found, often tends to fall flat when trying to recreate this. I mean, many DMs, even experienced ones, know how to do combat and role-playing incredibly well, but will often struggle with letting players explore. This is because of a few reasons, namely, you can plan almost every combat and most role-playing encounters in a campaign, but letting players explore freely could essentially double or even triple the prep work required to run a game. So, when I took a long, hard look at my D&D game and realised that between badass boss battles with ancient dragons and political decisions making roleplay this intricate political adventure that would shape the landscape for years to come, I had let the third pillar of D&D fall by the wayside. I realised that I needed to create a change. If you too are looking to find a way to make your world feel bigger, more interesting, then improving the exploration in your game is a really good way of going about doing that. But remember that in doing so, you are encouraging your players to become distracted from the central story. There are a few quick ways to improve exploration in your games, or to add it into your games to begin with. Just before I show you what I've come up with, a little disclaimer. I've attached a ton of links to these in the descriptions. Nobody has asked me or sponsored me to do this. These are tools that I genuinely use in my games, and I highly recommend. If you have something that you like to use, or something that I haven't covered in this video, then I would love to hear about it myself. So please pop it in the comment section or send me a message about it. Anyway, on to the list. Because exploration is largely a visual thing, like imagine you're playing a game and you see a point of interest. My first tip is to make it a visual thing in D&D. Now, this can be done by including artwork and maps. Most pre-made settings have detailed maps of certain areas with places of interest noted on them. Also, the internet is a wonderful place to find some fantasy D&D artwork displaying certain scenes. The best thing is that all of this is quick and easy and can be shared to the entire table via Messenger or other social media apps. Nothing creates a sense of awe like showing an image of a shop shelf filled with magical items. Maybe a muddy trail leads off the beaten path. A visual clue can make this far more interesting for your players. So my next tip is sound. It's no secret that films and games use sound to control their audience's mood. Most DMs will use sound in their games to help create atmosphere. But if you're the type of DM that also has one or two playlists for D&D with no real variety, then check out Brian Davis on Spotify. His playlists for all situations are well made, all instrumental, and are something I personally use on a game-by-game basis. Now, you'd be right in saying sound isn't really exploration. Of course not. But when you describe a journey through a muddy, fog-filled swamp, and the music emulates the same danger and suspense that the players are feeling, the players around your table will remember that sense of unease. It makes even a minor, loose description of a location feel more alive. The link to this guy's Spotify is in the description, and I highly recommend giving it a look. So next on the list, we have random dungeons. For players wanting to explore, spending some time with a notebook and pen and crafting up 5 or 6 one-page dungeons is a great way to add some variety to your game. It doesn't need to be special, just an interesting place that the players could spend a game exploring on their way to the next major location. Now, I recommend making it yourself. as you know your players, what they like, and how to create an interesting random dungeon adventure for them better than anyone else. But if you don't have the time, then in the description I have a link to a collection of one-page dungeons by Sage Advice, plus a tool for making your own. Imagine your players are exploring the hills around a small town and stumble across a small cave in which they shelter to spend the night. As they rest, they hear the sound of stone being moved and look up to see a cultist exiting a secret stone entranceway that leads into an unexplored dungeon within. It's cool, it's random, and it's memorable. So my next tip takes place in towns and cities. I found that the best way to explore a town or a city or an urban environment is to create a notice board of side quests. Now, these should have a purpose beyond go here, kill this. These will point the PCs to interesting characters and also interesting and unique locations within the city or town, allowing them to explore further whilst tugging on the narrative threads of a minor adventure. Maybe they are led to an important character that will later be needed to help them defeat the big bad evil guy of the campaign. By completing her side quest first, she is much more likely to hear the PCs out and offer her aid. Again, for those looking for an easy list, D&D Speak have a great list of about 100 random notice board adventures that I've linked in the description. And there are several people on DM's Guild that have made some fantastic notice boards for different places in the Sword Coast, specifically centered around the pre-made adventures the Wizards of the Coast have released. So my last tip is one that I came up with myself. When players travel from point A to point B, they might need to roll a survival check to not get lost on their journey. This is usually quite a low DC, especially if there's a road, and if they're exploring through a forest or a swamp, the DC might get a bit higher. Instead of just having this be a random roll with no other purpose, I've made a list of 30 random events and locations that they might find along the way. The lower the survival check, the worse the results will tend to be, going from things like monster encounters or stumbling into a random dungeon. And the higher they roll, you tend to have things like discovering natural flora and fauna, finding some NPCs, maybe coming across a small guard post. The important thing to remember about this list, however, is that these results are largely just buzzwords for the DM to create a random encounter. For example, if the DM wants to keep the adventure moving, they might see a giant eagle in the sky that swoops down and grabs hold of a wolf. It might not be a combat encounter for the players, just an interesting event that stands out on their journey. A list like this can be made for different settings too, and it can be something incredibly personal to the DM. You might make a list specifically for the Underdark, one for cities, forests. The one you see here is the one that I refer to. Some details can be added if you don't feel comfortable with improvising a scenario based on the buzzwords. And in fact, I've put some examples in for each of the different options on this list. You could even combine this with interesting NPCs or locations that you've designed earlier, including some random combat encounters that you've come up with. Well guys, that is all for today's video. Only a short one today. I hope you guys found this useful. Exploration is often one of those pillars of D&D that just gets kind of forgotten about. And if you're looking to sort of bring that back into your campaign and into your setting, I hope you consider some of these little tips. And if you have any that I've not mentioned on here, please let me know, and I'll be really interested to see what you guys have come up with of a way of emphasizing exploration in Dungeons and Dragons. Thanks again, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day and keep safe.